This is the practical halacha roundup from Yoreh Deah, Siman Pei Zayin Seif Aleph, from the laws of Basar b'chalav, the prohibition of mixing meat and milk, chapter 87, halacha number 1. So let's go from the beginning of this discussion of the seif to understand the main points that come out of this seif of the Shulchan Aruch. So number 1, let's go over the seif again, and then we'll go over the laws of halacha that come directly out of it as a result of this halacha. So it says in Seif Aleph that the Torah says one shall not cook meat in its mother's milk, lo tavashel gedi b'chalev imo, and this is repeated 3 times. One tells us about the prohibition on cooking, one tells us about the prohibition on eating, and one tells us about the prohibition of benefiting from it. And it says the word eating as a language of cooking to tell us that it's only prohibited by Torah law when cooking is used as the manner of combining these 2 items. But rabbinically, it's prohibited in every fashion of combination. And the Rama adds that all basar b'chalav that is not prohibited by the Torah is permitted for benefit. Now let's go over the final. We've discussed the explanation of this in our first 5 classes, and this one will go over the practical halakha. So number 1, we learn that the 3 times it's written is to tell us that you can't cook it, you can't eat it, and you can't benefit. The prohibition of benefiting from it is in every single situation when it comes to basar b'chalav, okay, which is you can't sell it, you can't give it as a gift to a non-Jew, and you can't feed it to an animal, okay, even if it's not your animal, because you're feeding an animal, and so therefore, you can't do that as well. If you burn it, you cannot benefit from the ash or the coals that it's made from it. So therefore, it's better you bury it or to throw it into the bathroom or to throw it into a river, a place where you can't ever benefit from it. So we talked a little bit about some things we'll learn more in depth later on. We learn that the bottom item that is hot influences the item on top of it. So therefore, if a case is where meat falls into milk that is hot, okay, or the meat is hot and milk falls onto it, when it's in a kli rishon, the fire, cooking on the fire, and the temperature is above Yad Soletis Bo, above 104 degrees Fahrenheit or 29 degrees Celsius, that is cooking and prohibited by Torah law, and therefore one cannot benefit from it. If it fell in and is removed immediately, it's still prohibited. Okay, but some people say that has to be cooked in it to at least the point of where it's cooked about a third or a half. So there's room to be lenient in those situations. Otherwise, basically you can't do it. Now pouring, we say pouring is not going to prohibit it by Torah law, and this is assuming that you pour it and the pouring doesn't come directly from the original utensil onto the thing. It's broken in the middle. It just splashes out. And so since we're not sure if that's cooking or not, it's also a doubtful prohibition. However, since it's a Torah prohibition that's doubtful, we are stringent in such cases, and the first level of it, the first klip as we call it, the top level, is prohibited. Okay, and it has to be removed and has to be destroyed. Okay, so that has to be large enough to be sliced underneath it and remove it all in one level. So however thin you can slice it and take it all off without breaking up separate pieces, that's considered how far down it is prohibited. Okay. Now, if the meat and the milk touch each other and they're both solid, okay, and they're both hot and they're touching each other and they're both hot on top of a flame, so that's a Torah prohibition as well, because the flame heats them up and they come together, and so that is prohibited. Okay. Now, if you roast them together, so you hold them over coals, so we said that that's not a clear prohibition because it's a different form of heat. It's roasting heat, which doesn't heat up the thing as fast as cooking. And since it's not actual cooking, it may only be a rabbinic prohibition and may be permitted to benefit from it. pot roasting it, which means that you've used dry heat, but they're collecting in a pot. If there is no if there's no juices coming from it, so that may not be cooking. Okay. However, if juices do come out of the meat and they start simmering, that's considered cooking. And we also mentioned that when you salt meat and the liquid from the meat drips out of it, that is considered part of the meat and would make a Torah prohibition and prohibit the mixture from hana, from benefiting from it. We also mentioned that if you cook meat in a dairy utensil, and that dairy utensil was used within 24 hours for dairy, you cooked it in there, that is a Torah prohibition. Okay, but since we learned about tam ovelo mamasho, we say it was only the flavor. We say it's not so strict, and we talked about that a little bit recently as well. If you cook meat in a dairy pot, okay, and then you go ahead and you cook something else in that pot, and everything happens within 24 hours, and in neither of the situations you have more than 60 times against it, and you don't have anything against, you don't have 6 times against what's between the milk and the meat that mix together, and what's against what's absorbed in the utensil itself, however much of the basar b'chalav was in there. So the second thing that's cooked in the flavor of basar b'chalav is able to be benefited from it, but you cannot eat it. Okay. If you cut meat with a hot knife, okay, and the knife was dairy, so that is assuming that the previous to the knife cut through hot dairy, like hot cheese, and now it's cutting the meat, and everything is hot, and everything, and that happened within 24 hours. So the meat is Torah prohibition, okay, and you have to kosher the knife. So the flavors go in and out of everything: the knife, the meat, and the cheese. A piece of meat that was cooked on its own, and then you have milk that was cooked on its own, and now they're all cooked together. So everyone agrees that when we talked about that issue of bishul achar bishul, that's still a Torah prohibition. Okay, it doesn't have to be cooked from raw; it just has to be cooked together. Now, if they were cooked together, and you take it and put it into water and cook it again, or it got cooled down and you turn it back up, not realizing the meat was still in there. So we're not sure if this is a case of bishul achar bishul where it would prohibit it. Now, what about, we talked about these cases as well. If you have meat and milk that was cooked and they're prohibited, and now it became too gross to eat. So if we mixed in nasty things into it, we mentioned like wormwood and other things like that, or I even mentioned talking about pouring bleach on it, it's still prohibited from eating and from benefiting from it. However, if it becomes disgusting on its own and putrefied, most people seem to say that the prohibition on benefit still applies to it. But some people say that it's not the same thing. It's not considered food anymore. So the dispute. If you cook these things together, and it was cooked together with something that ruins the flavor, okay? Or let's say each individual thing, the meat and the milk separately, was mixed with something that makes them not taste good. And then you cook them together. So that's not considered derech bishul, and they don't become Torah prohibited. Right? So nasty meat, nasty milk doesn't make basar b'chalav. Okay, and some people even says that this would allow you to go ahead and feed it to somebody who needs it when they are sick, because normally you couldn't do that because it would be isur hara. Okay, and you couldn't benefit from it. Basar b'chalav, that we've just mentioned, that becomes prohibited. And then it becomes unfit for human consumption. And we already said that's prohibited. If it becomes something that's so gross and it falls into another food item. So technically that flavor is considered nifgam, Okay, the flavor is considered no good, and the food that it falls into is going to be permitted, even if there's not shishim against it. The meat of a chaya or an oaf, okay, so of let's say a deer or a chicken, and it gets cooked with milk. The prohibition is only midrabanan. Okay, and so therefore, there's permission to cook them and to benefit from them. However, other people disagree with that, and we'll get more into that coming up. There are those who even say that even in that case, it's still prohibited to do that because of Maris Ayin. Now, Basar b'chalav, that became rabbinically prohibited. So the Ramah said that that's permitted to benefit from it, and you can sell them to a goy, and you can also use them for healing yourself or any type of medicinal purpose would be fine. Okay, whether it's to consume it or to drink it, as long as it's not a normal method of eating it or drinking it. Okay, and this isn't brought down here, but the application of it comes actually from Siman Kuf Nun Hey Seif Gimel in the Shulchan Aruch on the Ramah. Al Basar b'chalav that's cooked together. Which is not cooked together, but is mixed together. Okay, if it's two liquids, right, meat, gravy, and milk, and you smush them together. Okay, or you soak meat in some milk. Okay, or you salt the meat and you salt the cheese, right? And they touch each other. These are rabbinic prohibitions, and so too when we pour hot milk over it, where the pouring is not consistently from the original utensil, or you put them together in hot milk in a bowl, that's also only rabbinic. Okay, Basar b'chalav, that becomes prohibited by Torah law, and then it falls into another cooking food and gets mixed into it. So if you take the Basar b'chalav out of it, you could then sell that prohibited soup or whatever it is to a non-Jew. And if you see that it's completely batal, right? So you know that it's like a little tiny piece, and it fell into something parv, let's say. So at that point, and you can't take it out because it's like a big cholent, let's say. You could still sell that, but you have to remove whatever value was in the Basar b'chalav. Okay. The last halacha that we're going to go over tonight is if the utensil becomes prohibited by Basar b'chalav, you can sell that utensil to a non-Jew. And there are people who say that if the thing was new and you're worried that the non-Jew will sell it to another Jew, you maybe should avoid that. And then the way you could then sell to the non-Jew is if you do a hechsher on it yourself. So you don't need to do it, but if it's something that looks like the non-Jew will then come and sell to another Jew, it could be a problem of being machshel another Jew, and we don't want to put a mifshol in front of them, so you should kosher it before selling it to the non-Jew. Once you're koshering it, you can sell it to a Jew. It doesn't matter. And so once you're koshering it. Okay? And if it's a kli that you can't kosher, okay, so let's say that you cooked it in an earthenware pot, and you made that Basar b'chalav, okay, so that you could sell Isser d'Rabbanan, okay, and you also have to wait until it's not ben yomo, and then you could sell it to a non-Jew, unless there's a big need for it, okay. So that would be okay. So that should be okay in those situations. But technically, once you wait 24 hours, you should be able to sell even Isser, right? So that would also be d'Rabbanan. So I didn't write my note very well over here. So. Yeah, so if it's a Torah prohibition and it's more than 24 hours, then you can go ahead and sell that utensil as well. Well, thank you for joining me, I look forward to learning more with you as we continue in the laws of Basar B'chalav. We will continue with Siman Pei Zayin, Sif Beis. We will continue with chapter 87 in Yoreh Deah, Halacha Beis next time.